Since the Stone Age, humans have always known their identity. Kinship groups, ancestry, names, for thousands of years, except for one brief period of time in a handful of countries for a select class of people, people who were adopted. And in 43 states in the United States, adoptees, even adult adoptees, are prevented from knowing their original identity, not allowed to have original birth certificates. So my idea worth spreading is my original identity should not be a state secret. I'm going to give you 7 reasons. Reason number 1, international adoption. These are some adoptive parents you probably recognize. They have adopted kids from countries all over the world whose skin color and ethnicity is visibly not the same as theirs. It's not possible to whitewash these kids as being biologically their own. And in fact, the countries they were adopted from, those countries have laws protecting those kids' original identities. I found all of their birth names in 5 minutes of Googling. And I found their birth parents' names on Google as well. So if international adoptees have their identity protected, US adoptees should also be able to find out their original identity. Reason number 2, most countries have laws in place protecting children's identity. The United States helped draft an international treaty called the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and among other things, it offers the following protections: no child labor, no capital punishment for children, no lifetime imprisonment for children, and countries who sign this treaty agree not to make a state secret out of a child's original identity. There are 3 countries in the world who have not ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Want to guess who they are? Somalia, South Sudan, and the United States. Somalia and South Sudan actually say they're going to sign the treaty as soon as they can get their governments organized. The United States won't sign the treaty because we still engage in lifetime imprisonment for children, and we still have 43 states that make a state secret out of some children's identities. Reason number 3, you've probably heard this myth that birth parents who gave up children to adoption were promised some form of anonymity or privacy. And I'm not saying that never happened, but in general, that is not what birth parents were looking for. Young women and girls in the secrecy era of adoption in the US, which was from about the 1940s to the 1990s, in fact, they had to sign contracts saying, "I will not show up on your doorstep." They weren't the ones being protected. It was the new adoptive family. And in 1998, there was a case in Oregon. Oregon retroactively opened its adoption records. And here's what happened. An adoptee named Helen Hill used her inheritance to fund new legislation and support in the Oregon legislature for retroactive opening of adoption records. The biggest opponents were coalitions of adoption agencies with a lot of money and interest in keeping adoption records closed. The bill passed, but a judge said, let's give birth parents a way to object, to see how many of them are going to object to their privacy being eroded. 6 birth parents came forth, all Jane Does, to this day still not identified, so it was not an issue of their privacy being eroded by being involved in the case. And 3 dropped out. So out of all of Oregon, 3 birth parents said, I object to my identity being given away. And the appellate judge in this case actually found they were not promised privacy. Privacy is not an element of giving birth, and that a birth is a public event. Reason number 4 is a social justice reason. There's a philosopher named John Rawls who happens to be from right here in Baltimore. And what he studied was the philosophy of justice. And it went something like this. If a policy or a practice is justly applied to one person, then it is also just when applied to anyone else at random. So, my adoption records are closed. I do not have access to my birth certificate, so that means this is fair if your birth certificate is sealed away for all time and you're not allowed to have it no matter how old you are. Or your birth certificate is sealed away. Or you are never going to have the opportunity to meet the person who gave birth to you. That doesn't seem so fair now, does it? Reason number 5, most countries already retroactively opened their adoption records, including all of Western Europe and Australia, England. Most of Africa and Asia actually never closed their adoption records because they recognize the value of kinship and ancestry. It doesn't mean adoption doesn't take place. They just don't make a state secret out of a child's identity. They recognize it was a failed social experiment. Reason number 6, I already found my birth family on my own. It took me 25 years, and I did not participate in the state of Virginia's petition process for getting my records. I'm going to tell you how that process works. And this is a similar process to many other states. So I was born and adopted in Virginia. The chart is a little bit different than it should be. So let me just tell you how the process works. I file a petition with the circuit court judge. The judge says to the adoption agency, you will perform a search. And the agency says to me, you will pay us hundreds of dollars. The adoption agency, if they are still in business, they open the file they have had for 44 years, and they get the names of the people in it, and they Google them. And they call them up on the phone and say, do you consent to have your identifying information given to Catharine Robertson? But here's the trick. That looks a little different too. If both birth parents are dead, it's an automatic denial of my petition because the rationale says they don't have a chance. They're not alive. They don't have a chance to say no. If one is dead and both are alive, if one is dead and one is alive and says yes, it's still an automatic denial because the one who's not living doesn't have a chance to say no to me. If they're both alive, one says yes but one says no, it's a denial of all information, even for the one who said yes. And then here's the thing about the law in Virginia and about adoption law in so many states. It's written so subjectively that a judge has a right to say no to me, even if both birth parents said yes. Because the judge has a subjective right to say, was my given reason on the petition compelling enough? As if my asking for my identity isn't a compelling reason. I'm missing some photos. So I found my birth parents last summer. One was alive, Susan, my birth mother, who's sitting in the audience. I'm very sad to tell you that my birth father, Dodie, died in 1979. But his sisters, my aunts, are here. So my petition would have been denied. However, I chose not to participate in such a crazy Ponzi scheme. and I did my search on my own. It took me 25 years of searching, but when I contacted Susan on Facebook last June, she responded within 90 minutes. And did something awful happen because I had this information and I contacted her? No. That is me with Susan on my birthday last year. The first birthday I spent with my birth mother, the first one I remember. We began to love each other. In August, Susan and I went to visit Dodi's mother, my grandmother, and my aunts, Mina and Noni, and we began to love each other. Susan and I went to visit my dad, my adoptive father, my dad, who's also here today. We began to love each other. And in October, I played music for Dodi's family. Dodi was a musician, which I learned 34 years after his death. So my idea worth spreading is information. It's not dangerous. We can handle the truth. And I deserve my original identity. Thank you.